This is IGN. A surprise through and through, Skeleton Crew is a high point of Disney's Star Wars. This is your IGN review of Star Wars Skeleton Crew Season 1 by Sam Barsanti. When Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace came out, the dramatic backlash against its slapstick humor and precocious kid hero prompted George Lucas to argue that Star Wars was and always had been for children. He didn't necessarily mean exclusively for children, because Lucas would never dismiss the power of a good story so casually, but he believed that children were an important audience for Star Wars and the things it had to say. Maybe not since the original trilogy, though, has that belief been as well articulated as it is in Disney Plus's Skeleton Crew. The family-friendly series that's mostly concerned with the horrors of growing up in suburbia just might be more important to the future of Star Wars than the much-lauded and undeniably better first season of Andor. Kid-oriented Star Wars stuff has been around forever, and Disney has specifically never shied away from selling Star Wars to children. But this is one of Disney's first and most successful attempts to actually use the power of Star Wars to say something to kids. Just look at the end credits of the finale, which plays out like Ravi Cabot-Conyers' character Wim's Jedi adventure book, as a nod to the idea that this is the kind of adventure story that could blow open a kid's mind like the Jedi stories did for Wim. Better yet, the stuff Skeleton Crew has to say is relevant to a younger audience, like when KB, played by Kiriana Crater, talks about how her friendship with Fern, played by Ryan Kiera Armstrong, changed when she started using a prosthesis, or it's baked into the show's central gimmick as a sci-fi take on 80s movies like The Goonies, like in Episode 5, the series' highpoint, which dared to question whether or not nostalgia is good. The shy kid comes out of his shell, the bossy kid learns how to show affection for her friends, and the arguably naive kid refuses to let the bitterness of adults shatter his capacity for hope and joy. These are all good things to depict. Skeleton Crew trusts us to pick up on the clues that there's something suspicious about the kid's homeworld of Ad-Adin, with its constantly absent adults and constantly present security droids. And there's the quietly huge moment when it comes out that Wim and friends don't know about the Galactic Civil War. I mean, how could anyone not be intrigued by a Star Wars story where the characters never heard of the Star Wars? The show also doesn't belabor the point of whether or not Jude Law's Jod Nanawood can be trusted, by having his reluctant crewmates on the Onyx Cinder decide pretty quickly that no, he can't be trusted, and then treating him accordingly right up until he decides to stop pretending he isn't at least a little evil. It's not just the big ideas that Skeleton Crew has a handle on. It also impressively allows the kids to act like kids. It's always fun when they get time to goof around without letting them get too aggravating. They have emotional blow-ups and breakdowns, but they solve their problems the way kids do, by just talking about them. Episode 6 is the clearest example of this, when the crew briefly breaks up over manufactured drama that ends up being about KB's anxiety around keeping up with bullheaded Fern. There's no bitterness when they reunite, they just accept that everyone has feelings and move on. Compare that to the obvious lifelong grudges held by Jod and his fellow space pirates, which they can never let go of. The most important achievement of Skeleton Crew is that when it's good, which is often, it's because of the kids and not despite them. The storylines with the adults are the ones that often feel lacking, as fun as it is to see TV on the radio's Tunde Adebimpe haplessly try to father a space kid. Granted, the bar is lower for the younger characters and actors because they're not fully formed people yet, but they're not supposed to be. Skeleton Crew not only knows that, but embraces and highlights it in a way that makes it feel meaningful, whether this is your 7th Star Wars show or your first. Skeleton Crew could have been a disaster, and maybe even should have been. A Star Wars show starring kids and heavily inspired by the Goonies, set in the same overused post-Return of the Jedi timeline as The Mandalorian? It seems like an insulting, desperate move, and yet it all more or less works beautifully, with compelling mysteries, thoughtful character arcs, and a reminder that Star Wars can be great, even or especially when it's for kids. Star Wars Skeleton Crew Season 1's IGN score? 8. Thanks for listening to IGN. My name is Tony Jackson, and for the latest Star Wars reviews and updates, visit us at IGN.com.
Spoken Layer.